Welcome back to Wichita Liberty TV. I'm Bob Weeks. As Wichita struggles with its needs, both real and imagined, we're going to be told that the only option is a sales tax increase, or maybe some other tax. I really don't know. But look at this. The street lights illustrated in these recent photographs are competing very strongly with the sun to illuminate Wichita streets in the middle of a few very sunny days. Undoubtedly, these examples of waste represent a small portion of the city's spending. But you don't have to look very hard to find waste like this. And we know that small examples of waste are multiplied many times. So when city leaders tell us that there is nowhere left to cut in the budget, that everything that can be done to trim the fat has already been done, and that the only thing we can do is raise taxes, well, think of these photographs. Now, this is not to say that waste like this does not occur in the private sector. Of course it does. But businesses and individuals have a powerful incentive to avoid waste that is not present in government. And that is, businesses and people are spending their own money. The government bureaucrats in charge of these streetlights are spending someone else's money within a system where there is no profit motive and little fear of losses, and correspondingly little accountability. Well, burning streetlights unneedlessly in the middle of the day is a small problem. But here's a really big problem. Wichita government leaders complain that Wichita can't compete in economic development with other cities and states because the budget for incentives is too small. But when making this argument, these officials are not including all the available incentives that we have. Now, last week, the Wichita City Council was presented with a plan for a fund to create jobs. And the document was titled, "Will Wichita Accelerate Competition for Primary Jobs? Time for a Community Discussion." But this document contains contradictory information about the money that is available for economic development incentives in Wichita. Now, the usual argument that officials make is represented by this quotation from the report, which is, Wichita and Sedgwick County compete conservatively with incentives. The city of Wichita and Sedgwick County have a total of $1.65 million a year in new uncommitted funds for cash incentives, with any unused money going back to the general fund. But the very same report contains this. The $4.5 million peak program incentive from the Kansas Department of Commerce was an important factor in keeping Netapp in Wichita. Locally, we were able to provide $836,000 incentives. So, with an incentives budget of $1.65 million, a Wichita company received $5.3 million in incentives. Now, some of this, like the peak incentive, is paid over a period of years. But that doesn't begin to describe the benefits Netapp received. I obtained a letter to Netapp from the Kansas Department of Commerce that laid out the potential benefits from the state of Kansas. And as detailed in that letter, the programs and potential dollar amounts are, well, there was the peak of up to $7.7 million. There's some industrial training grants of up to $160,000. Sales tax savings of $6.8 million, personal property tax exemption worth $11.9 million, and high performance incentive program credits of $8.5 million, the total of that being $35 million. Some of these are paid not upfront, but over a period of years. The peak benefits, for example, are payable over 7 years according to the letter, so that's about $1.1 million a year. These also represent potential benefits the company may not actually qualify for and receive this entire amount, but it's what the state offered. And it's true now that some of these programs, strictly speaking, are not cash incentives of the type Wichita complains of lacking. But if a company is going to make purchases, and the state says you can skip paying the sales tax on the purchase, well, that's about as good as cash, and almost $7 million of cash in the case of Netapp, according to the Kansas Chamber of Commerce. Well, besides sales tax exemptions, the city has other types of tax exemptions it regularly offers. These exemptions can have substantial value. In 2008, as Drury contemplated purchasing the Broadview Hotel in downtown Wichita, the city allowed the hotel to escape paying much of the taxes that the rest of us have to pay. According to city information, Drury planned to spend about $23 million on the hotel. Well, a rough calculation tells us that the hotel will save on that property about $700,000 per year in tax payments. And remember, city officials complain of an incentives budget of only $1.65 million per year. And when Boeing announced in 2012 that it was closing its Wichita operations, city leaders complained that Boeing was leaving even though it had received many incentives from Wichita. From 1979 to 2007, Boeing received tax abatements through the industrial revenue bond process worth $658 million, according to a compilation provided by the city of Wichita. And at the time, city officials said the average amount of bonds was about $120 million per year. With Wichita commercial property tax rates at slightly over 3% of appraised value, according to GWEDEC, that's a tax savings of around $3.6 million per year. And to Boeing, that's as good as receiving cash year after year. And remember, city officials say the incentives budget is only $1.65 million per year. Well, there's more. In 2013, Wichita approved a package benefiting Exchange Place in downtown. The city agenda packet told us that the project qualified for $12.5 million in tax increment financing. TIF, or tax increment financing, diverts future increased tax revenues away from the normal uses and diverts them back to the project. In this case, the city will borrow the $12.5 million by selling bonds. It will give this money to the developers, and then TIF proceeds will be used to repay these bonds. Now, some argue that TIF is not really an incentive. The owners of the property will have to pay their personal property taxes just like any other property owner. But for this project, the property taxes are used for the project's own benefit instead of paying for city government. In other words, this project gets to spend $12.5 million of its property tax payments on itself, rather than having those payments fund the cost of Wichita city government. And remember, Wichita city officials say the incentives budget is only $1.65 million per year. Well, there's more. The Ambassador Hotel in downtown Wichita received many incentives, including $3.8 million in tax credits from the state of Kansas and $3.5 million in tax credits from the United States government. All told, this project was slated to receive about $15 million in taxpayer funds to get started, with additional funds provided annually. The tax credits that the Ambassador Hotel received are historic preservation tax credits. They have the same economic impact as a cash payment. The federal tax credits are available across the country, while the Kansas tax credits, of course, are a Kansas state program. But in this case, the hotel developers received an upfront payment of $3.8 million from the state of Kansas in a form that's just as good as cash. Remember, city officials say the incentives budget is only $1.65 million per year. Well, there's more. Last year, according to city documents, a Star Bonds district in northeast Wichita was approved to receive $31.5 million from these bonds. The Star Bonds are paid off with sales tax revenue that would otherwise go to the state and overlapping jurisdictions like Sedgwick County and the city of Wichita. This is sales tax revenue collected from the business customers and doesn't cost the business anything. Remember, city officials say the incentives budget is only $1.65 million per year. Well, there's even more. The list is not complete. There are other programs and other beneficiaries of economic development subsidies. It's important for citizens to know that, contrary to the claims of officials, Wichita has many economic development incentive programs available, and some have substantial value to the recipients with corresponding cost to the city and other jurisdictions. The $1.65 million that city officials talk about is simply the tip of the iceberg and not an honest representation of the incentives that Wichita can give to companies. Well, thank you for watching this episode of Wichita Liberty TV. I'm Bob Weeks.